It's the magic of the musicals on Broadway, and you join me here at the St. James Theatre for a production which I have to say I don't really like. Gary Beach, how are you?
I'm just great, thanks.
Gary, I don't like it. I love this show, and I've seen it about 15 times, and every time I come to New York or LA, if I'm lucky enough to get there, I go and see this show because it is, without question, in my opinion, the funniest show ever.
You know, right after we opened here in New York, one of the local critics, his quote was "the best show ever," and I think that that's so over the top, like the show itself. But I have to agree with you. Just before doing this, I did out in California a production of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which I think before us was certainly the funniest show ever. But I don't disagree with you. I hear laughs every night. I think that's one reason I've been with the show so long. It never gets tired for me. The laughs come at you ferociously every night. I love it.
Mel Brooks is a genius, isn't he?
He is a genius, and that was part of the joy of putting this show together originally back in 2001. That Mel was there, very hands-on. Of course, we had the great Susan Stroman, who kept him in line, and the rest of us, because we're all bad boys. We call ourselves laugh whores, because we'll do anything for the laugh. You know, at the time we had Nathan Lane, Matthew Broderick, Roger Bart, Katie Huffman, and Brad Oscar, and these are all people who know what they're doing. So we did have Susan Stroman as our ringmaster to like crack the whip and keep us in line, and that's too far, believe it or not. We could go too far. And still today we have a different cast. I just came back from Los Angeles, opening the show out there with Jason Alexander, the great Martin Short, and it transfers from coast to coast. They love it out there too.
What I love about the show is the energy in it. There really is an incredible amount of effort goes into every single performance to make this thing happen. Some shows just kind of glide along and it's wonderful to watch and they're fantastic in their own right, but this really does take effort from the two lead characters.
I think it was said at the time, and I don't think it's been disproved, that everyone working on this show, when we were in rehearsal and in the planning stages, was working at the top of their form, from Mel to Susan, of course, our lighting designer, our great costume designer, William Ivy Long. He sort of topped himself with this show and then went on, of course, to do Hairspray, where I think he topped himself again. But every one of us were allowed to work at our peak, and I think it still shows on stage.
What I said to the people at Hairspray was that I think that's the most fun, but this is the funniest in a sense that if you don't get one gag, you'll get the next one. And it's a bit like a bus, really. If you miss that one, then there's another one coming along, and you can miss that one and you'll still be laughing 10 seconds later because it really is so brilliantly written. You don't feel stupid if you don't get the joke. You can just titter all the way through.
Yeah, well, the thing about this show is basically about one thing: people wanting to put on a Broadway musical, which they, of course, consider to be the ultimate in art. And you have Max Bialystock, who is he fancies himself a great entrepreneur, impresario, producer of Broadway. Of course, he's schlock, but that doesn't keep him from wanting to be a great producer. Then you have Leo Bloom, who is an accountant, and all he wants to do is be a producer. Then you've got Roger Debris, who considers himself a great director. He's terrible, too. But all of these people, they just want to put on a show. And you've got, of course, all the little old ladies from Little Old Ladyland who Max Bialystock hits on for money to put on his shows. That's all this show's about, putting on a show. And I think that appeals to a lot of audiences.
And the thing I love about it as well, it's a parody of a parody, parodying an ironic parody, really, isn't it? We're seeing a show about a show, and then a show within a show.
That's right. That's right. I think, if you recall in the movie, the fans of the movie, they all wonder, how are they going to deal with Springtime for Hitler? Well, our audience in the theater, in our case at the St. James, becomes the audience of Springtime for Hitler. And some nights they are totally outraged by it. Others, they find it just hysterically funny. In fact, often, because I'm in the number, I see two people sitting next to each other having totally different reactions to this number. One night, we hadn't opened yet. We were in previews here in New York. I believe it was the first week. I was in the middle of Springtime for Hitler, and I do play Adolf Elizabeth Hitler in the show itself. And I'm skipping across the stage, and I see someone in the front row stand up. He was yelling at the stage, goes storming out into the lobby. Now, the audience is laughing hysterically. They actually think it's part of the show. He gets to the lobby. Well, who's sitting in the back? Mel Brooks. And Mel goes out to the lobby, and this old guy and Mel You've got two old Jews out in the lobby yelling and screaming at each other. You say, "You should be ashamed of yourself." And Mel said, "I fought in World War II." You know, this is what we have going. Well, this show can have different reactions to different people. But the only enemy of this show is a dumb audience. If you come here with no idea of what we're doing, or New York, or World War II, or Nietzsche, or any of those things, you may not have a good time. But if you come in with a full platter, you're going to love it. One of the most difficult jobs I've ever had, or we've ever had here in this theater, was 2 days after 9/11. Of course, all of Broadway, New York, America practically shut down for 2 days. Mayor Giuliani actually called our producer, Rocco Landisman, and said, "Can the producers be on tonight?" At 9/13, September 13th. And Rocco said, "Absolutely." So all of Broadway lit up that night. And I came to work, and I was walking from the subway over on 47th Street. If you know New York, it's Times Square, basically. I'm walking across a Times Square at close to half hour on September 13th. Normally, it's pretty bustling. There was no one. I see no one. I cross across 44th Street. I look down the street. I see no one. Schubert Alley, a few people. I turn the corner onto 44th Street, where we are, and there were hundreds of people in front of the St. James, and they wanted to laugh. To do Hitler that night, it reverberated so much, because all of a sudden the laughs became ferocious, totally ferocious in the middle of that number, because, I think people maybe said to themselves, if we can laugh at this, like this 50 years after this guy Bin Laden will be gone too. And when I left the theater that night, some lady grabbed me. She says, "Do you think you'll be doing a musical about Bin Laden next?" I said, "I hope so." I'll never forget the night. I'll never forget it.
Let's talk about you as a performer. Gary Beach, you've done so much. How did you get here? Because Broadway is so amazing. We were talking before the interview about the quality of performers. How did you make your way here?
It's a place I always wanted to be. I grew up in Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia, which is a town right outside of Washington, D.C. I started going to the theater at a young age, but I don't come from that as a background. My family are people that never went to the theater, but for some reason I was attracted to it. And through a series of lucky incidents or whatever, I ended up going to Broadway. It's like I auditioned. I mean, I studied. Of course, I studied. I always, when I speak to schools and to kids, I always say the worst thing is a dumb actor. If you come at this with a lack of knowledge of anything, from what someone wears to what they eat, architecture, whatever, you have to come at it with everything. The Producers is a perfect example of that. Sometimes I think we walk out and we're in the middle of Springtime for Hitler. There's the challenge tap, where, of course, Joseph Stalin and Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt challenge Adolf Hitler to a tap contest. Well, some nights, I swear to you, I think some of the audience is looking at the stage and saying, "Who's the guy in the wheelchair?" Really. Of course, President Roosevelt. But other nights, as soon as the wheelchair comes rolling out, they think, "Oh, my God, this man is challenging to a tap number." It's deeply funny.
I heard a line on the TV this morning as I woke up, which I thought was wonderful, that a guy said, "You're getting old when you take a girlfriend out to the movies and you say you're going to see a film about JFK, and she says, 'Why are they making a film about an airport?'"
Oh, dear, yes. So there you go. May I introduce you to Brad Musgrove, who plays Carmen Gia.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, great. Glad to be here.
You have a really fun part, don't you?
It's being paid to go to a party.
Camp, outrageous, ridiculous. Well, what can I call this character?
All of the above. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Everything that is you've wanted to do in your secret life, the life that you have in your head, you get to do on stage. There are no rules. There are, over the top is not enough.
I love the arms and the legs and the movements and the way that you enter and go off stage. It's just so brilliantly done. How long did it take you to rehearse this part so it was perfect?
It's always a work in progress. I understudied the role from the beginning of the show, so I had about a year, a little longer, to watch Roger Bart and emulate what he did and put my own style on it. I have a dance background. I had my primary career as a dancer, and so I bring a physicality to the role.
Brad is, do you remember the show Fosse? He was an original cast member. As a matter of fact, Brad was the logo of the show. The guy at the hat, that was Brad Musgrove.
5 stories tall in the West End. There was the picture of me out in front of, I forget what theater it was, but Gwen Verdon had given me a photo of opening night with all the crowds below the marquee and everything, and my picture 5 stories tall. It was really quite thrilling.
So he does bring a physicality to it that none of the other Carmen Gias have been able to do. And it's, in fact, so much so that William Ivey Long redesigned the costume for Brad Musgrove, because he just has, you'll see, he's wonderful, he's funny, and we love working together. It's a gas.
There's no one better to be on stage with than Mr. Gary Beach.
Whoa, how sweet. But, you know,
this is so nice, isn't it?
But I have to tell you, you know, for all those that have not seen the show, they'll find out that the real love interest of this show is Carmen and Roger Debris. It really is. They totally depend on each other and love each other, and they're just two outrageous queens that live uptown. That's what they are.
Can you overcamp your role, do you think?
You can only go over the top if there's no heart. If there is no love between, speaking for our roles, between Carmen and Roger. If there's no love and no dependency and no honest, you know, coming from the heart support, then if you were two individuals, if you were two comedians out there just yucking it up and shticking it up for your own self, as opposed to helping support
the
other, yes, that can go too far. Yeah. You know, as far if you're, you know, too campy, as long as the other person is a complement to that, and there's a love there, there's a mutual respect and a love there, then you really you can't really go too wrong.
I'm going to ask you one final question each, and it's why you? Why do you think you got the role? Because this is such a competitive business. There are hundreds of thousands of people who think they're stars, who want to be stars. You've only got to watch Pop Idol to realise that. Yeah. And you're sat here now in an amazing theatre in probably the best production ever, possibly. I mean, certainly in terms of winning awards. So why you?
My initial response is to say I'm lucky, but for me, my definition of luck is preparation meeting opportunity. The opportunity was there, and I was prepared. I originally came into the show with the original company as a dance captain. I was known on Broadway as a dance captain. They needed a dance captain for the show. They hired me. I was a swing. I was versatile enough to do many different parts, and I understudied the role from the beginning. As far as being lucky enough to be given the opportunity to have the role of Carmen for myself, I really like the character, and when I went on as an understudy, I knew that there was something I could bring to it, to something different. I could enhance, not enhance. I could honor what was given to me, you know, by Roger Bart, who was absolutely so brilliant in the part. And basically, it's a fancy way to say if I could steal what he did. You know, every good performance, you steal something from someone you admire, and I definitely admire him and his take on the part. You know, there was something else I could bring to it to make it my own. And I was lucky enough that the director and the producers recognized that as well and gave me the part. I am the luckiest person in show business. You know, I'm sure if you interviewed everyone in the show, they'd all say that. But
you'd all say that Brad is the luckiest fellow in show business.
No, it really is, because I know my career as a dancer, and that's all I ever really wanted. I just, you know, wanted to dance, and I was lucky enough to do, you know, great dance pieces and to do Fosse, which was a brilliant choreographer's work. That to be given the opportunity to actually say words and sing songs, and I don't dance a step in this show. It's a nice departure, but I grabbed onto it with both hands, knowing that this kind of opportunity rarely happens for a chorus dancer, and I'm just thrilled to be here.
Brad, do you think you'll ever go back to just being able to dance now, or do you think you'll always want to do a bit of the comedy and a bit of the acting? Is it too much fun to give it up now?
You know, as a dancer, you are an actor. you just do it without saying words. You use your body, you use your face, you use your expressions to create a mood, to suit the piece. And so there will always be acting involved. As far as straight talking, you know what? I have to say I go where the work is. And if there's a dance piece that excites me as a dancer, as it excites the creative part of me, then yes, I will be more than happy to return to that. I don't feel that I'm breaking out of anything, because the dance world was very good to me, and I was thrilled to be there, and I don't consider it something to break out of. You know, I will always be happy to return.
You certainly don't do much straight talking in this role, do you?
No. Straight, no.
Finally, to you, I mean, this is the greatest role, isn't it, really? I mean, is there any other role you could do now that you would enjoy as much, do you think?
That is a great question, and I really don't know. I can say that I'm still, having the time of my life doing this. And I also have to say, for those who are interested, it was the easiest job I ever got. I got a call one day. I was living in Los Angeles, and the great Vinnie Liff, who since left us, he's passed away about a year or so ago, a great casting director here in New York, and basically called me and said, Gary, we're doing a reading of the producers. Nathan is going to be doing Max, and there's this part that you have to get in on very early. It's everything you do. And then when I found out that the departure was that this guy also plays Hitler, which is different from the film, I thought, oh my God. I flew to New York. We did the reading a couple of times on a Sunday. They raised all the money that afternoon to do the show. And the next day I got a phone call, and it was Vinny. And he said, Gary, they're not even going to audition anybody. It's yours. And that's how I got this show.
Incredible.
That has brought me just so much happiness. Really, I love it.
The thing that I find ironic about this show is if it had died on its backside, it would have been the biggest embarrassment ever, because that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about shows not succeeding. Thank God they did it well.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the show has been blessed from the beginning. But you're right. Everybody said, didn't you know? Didn't you know? And, of course, the answer is no. I think the first time we had an inkling was when we were in rehearsal, and they do a press junket sort of thing where they invite fellows like yourself in, or the local newspapers, reporters, columnists, to see a presentation. We did the opening number, which had been staged, and this is no costumes or anything in a rehearsal hall. The opening number, Matthew and the girls did I Want to Be a Producer, and then we did the finale of Act One. Well, at the end of that, the press stood up and cheered. Well, that's not done. They're supposed to leave there and say, oh, these people are in trouble. That's what's supposed to happen. So I think that was the first inkling I had that, then you get worried. You think, oh, well, they're expecting too much now. So then when we got to Chicago, it started happening. And by the time we got back here to New York, went into rehearsal again before previews, there were lines down the street. And, of course, after we opened, and the Tonys and all of that, you know what happened.
It was madness.
It's an incredible show and an incredible success. And when I say this is the funniest show ever, I mean it. It genuinely is. I come and talk to you guys every time I come to New York, and I talked to Brad last year, and I could talk to you for hours because there's so much to talk about this show. Mel Brooks is a genius. I think it's official, isn't it?
He is. I got to tell you this before we leave.
Go on.
If you've seen the show, you'll appreciate this. We were in rehearsal, and the end of the Keep It Gay scene, they convinced Roger Debris, myself, to sign the contract. And it was written, Roger Debris. And that was the end. And we rehearsed like that for like weeks. And Mel was sitting in front of me this day, and Nathan holds out, sign the paper. And I take the pen and I go, Roger Debris. And Mel yells out, Roger Elizabeth Debris. And of course, we all looked at each other. It was like, of course. Of course.
Of course.
And so it just puts a button on the scene. It's perfect. And he just thought of it like that.